My name is Jasmine. I'm 18 years old, and I know for a fact that if I didn't have God's love and God's healing in my life, that I probably still wouldn't be around. I've been raised in a Christian family my whole life. My mum was the worship leader at our church, and my dad did worship stuff as well, and a lot of behind the scenes work and stuff like that. And I went to a Christian school my whole life, and I've known a lot of the Bible stories my entire life, and I've known the basics about Jesus, but it wasn't until quite recently that I really had a really in-depth understanding of God's real love for me. When I was 11 years old, I brought my dad along to a sports day carnival at my school, and unfortunately a really large gust of wind blew over a tree and it fell down on top of him and it crushed him, and ever since then he's been paralysed.
A man who was left a paraplegic when a tree fell on him at a sports carnival.
He was injured when a freak wind gust toppled a tree onto spectators at Northgate.
And he was in hospital for a couple of years, firstly in intensive care, then he had to go to rehabilitation for that. But by the time that his body had healed and he'd come back home, my family had already fallen apart. My mum couldn't deal with the stress of the situation and eventually moved out of home. My dad got really depressed about losing a lot of things, and after seeing both my mum and my dad go through really depressive stages, I began to see that I was suffering with depression as well, and that this really strong root of just darkness and negativity and self-hate had really been planted in my heart over those years. I tried to heal myself mentally and numb myself just emotionally by hurting myself physically. I used to self-harm a lot. I used to have a lot of suicidal thoughts and stuff like that ever since I was in about year 8. I never really realised that I needed true healing until a couple of months ago. I genuinely believe that God healed all these things in my life, healed things in my family and my friends and my schooling, but I just ignored it all. I graduated year 12. I did okay, but ever since I graduated and there was no distraction of school or work or learning, ever since I had this hole in my life, I realised that I'd been ignoring my problems this whole time and that I hadn't really been giving over anything to God. And as that began to overwhelm me and I began to realise how depressed and anxious I actually was, I got into this really, really bad state. And eventually, after just being overwhelmed with all these bad things happening to me and this just negative attitude, I eventually tried to take my own life. I ended up in hospital and I stayed in the mental health ward for about a week. And after I was discharged, I didn't really have a reason to live. I didn't really have a reason to get up out of bed and go on and talk to people and keep doing the things that I loved. I didn't have any motivation. Like anything that I had before hospital was gone, because when I got out, there was absolutely nothing in my heart that made me want to just keep going and keep pursuing anything. But on a Sunday morning, just after I was discharged, my dad was going to church, and I thought, I might as well just put on a brave face again for my family and just do things normally and keep going to church, I guess, just to make them happy for a little while. On that Sunday morning, I know in the natural sense I had absolutely no reason to worship God. I looked at my life and I didn't see anything that made me want to worship Him or thank Him for the things that He'd done. I didn't have any real human reason to love God or to believe that things were going to get better. But for some reason, when I was sitting in my chair, listening to worship and listening to people declare that God is good and faithful and consistent and loving, even though I'd heard it so many times, I was so compelled to just raise my hands one last time and see what would happen. I can't describe what it's like to really encounter God's love, but I can say that it's the most rewarding thing ever to just stand up when you're feeling like you can't and worshiping when you feel like you shouldn't be. Just giving myself over to God when I felt like there was no hope. On the other end of that, after just putting out that faith and taking the step to worship Him when I felt like there was nothing to come out of it, I saw that everything came out of it. And ever since that first step in worshiping Him, over these last couple months, I know that God has brought so much healing and worth into my life. I couldn't have done it on my own. This healing and this true passion and this true joy that's come into my life so quickly and incredibly didn't come from myself. I know that it only came from God. I know that everything that I've achieved and every good feeling I've ever felt ever since that day that I decided to just worship God and to just surrender to Him no matter what life looks like. Ever since then, this faith has just kept going and kept growing, and I've never felt so close to God, and I've never felt so good about life and about my future. I know I'm so sure about God, and I know that He's going to keep me and He's going to keep loving me and pushing me towards a better version of myself and a better future. My name is Jasmine, and I'm unashamed.